In autumn of this year, it was announced that the FalleN Gaming, which is a company, obviously in the name of FalleN, the legendary Brazilian Counter-Strike player, plays for Team Liquid at the recording time of this video, probably the most legendary player in Counter-Strike to come from Brazil. It'd be between him, Kogu, and Zyrathenia, depending on how you chop it up. No, not FNX. You can stop mentioning him, by the way. People who don't know his history and just want to crowbar people. What about this guy? How about just listen to the people who know more than you? So the company, FalleN Gaming, is one that his mother, Kenia Toledo, is the CEO of, and it was announced that they, around, I think it was like September, October, that they'd forged a partnership with Valve Corporation, the company that publishes and owns the IP of CSGO, to brand products featuring Valve games, Dota 2, CSGO, and brands in the Latin American region. There'll be a link in the description box below from Sports Business Journal, for example, if you want to read up on this. They've already, from the company, done videos where they show off like a bunch of different people who are kind of their influencers, like MIBR legends, people like Gowles, obviously was in MIBR briefly, was in G3X, is a massive streamer. There's a whole bunch of people in the mix there if you go and have a look. Apparently the deal took around 2 years to negotiate and get to this point, and a quote that you can take here is, the company will use Valve brands to enhance the appeal of these products in the local market. Now apparently the products will largely be lifestyle apparel gear, so clothing, etc., and peripherals. Obviously FalleN previously was involved with selling keyboards, I think it was, which bought a bunch from a separate company and sort of rebranded them. There's a whole thing that Richard sort of brought out where it sounded like the quality of them wasn't necessarily the best. The focus, since it's Valve, will be CSGO and Dota 2, and apparently that's actually part of how they pitched for this partnership. They actually brought along 3 separate catalogues. One was for Dota 2, one was for CSGO, and one was just for Valve-related stuff themselves. Now, you might think, what's the issue here, right? One of the most popular figures in Brazilian esports, a guy who already has a number of different business ventures. He obviously was with the Gamers Club stuff previously. They helped sell to IGC, which was a company that owns MIBR, etc. Valve themselves want to get into this market. It's an emerging region, massive amount of fans there. Obviously, they want to sell branded goods, but they're a small company themselves in terms of they don't try to hire loads of staff, etc., especially not for all the different games. So you would think, yes, makes sense, right? A great business deal for everyone. The problem is, if you're not Valve and you're not FalleN, because there is an issue here. The issue is that FalleN, as of right now, is, and during the negotiation period was, an active professional player competing in one of Valve's games and at tournaments which Valve ultimately is responsible for, such as the major and part of the major cycle, in terms of rules, rulings, determining what goes on within the game, potentially banning people. Obviously, in the past, Valve has banned the iBuyPower players, people like Dazed and Steel, for match fixing. Kaylee was obviously VAC banned in the game for cheating outright, right? Yes, that was obviously an automated ban in that particular sense. Now, since Valve is now a business partner of FalleN, as well as the company that provide the game he competes in, they're essentially being asked to now, on some level, police and make impartial judgments, potentially, keyword potentially, for someone who also, at the same time as being a competitor in their game, is simultaneously a business partner of theirs, and who they essentially rely upon to make money, to use his branding, his shared popularity. And in fact, him being a pro player and indeed succeeding in the game would be good for their business venture potentially. And by the way, essentially, as far as I can tell with this branding deal, they don't even have to do anything in this deal. They basically do nothing, and he just goes out there, prints money and sends some back to them, as it was, and he does business. They just get money for nothing. Well, it's not nothing, it's for owning the IP rights, yeah? And it's obviously in an emerging region with a large amount of fan interest. So the problem is, when you then get into scenarios where potentially Valve is policing or determining things for FalleN, for FalleN's region, for teams that FalleN plays for, now there has to be a question asked, which is like, are they totally impartial here? Are they unbiased? Are there measures in place which mean that there's no fuckery can happen? Because here's the point. If they want their business partner to succeed in their joint venture, well, then there's other respects in which it might benefit them if he succeeds or isn't punished in some way. What if, for example, might sound like a crazy thing to even speculate upon, right? But what if he cheated or he did anything that was questionable competitively? Now, I'm not saying he did or will do. That is this is a what if, essentially, for what happens when conflict of interest arise and why you try to avoid them wherever possible. How would Valve deal with it? How would they make sure they weren't being biased? How would other people, pro players, teams that are unrelated to FalleN Valve, how would they ensure that this was held with on a reasonable basis? And by the way, even though I say it in this context, I'm not specifically saying he's cheated and done things that are questionable, but he has. Like, I've seen them with my own eyes at E-League Season 2. He talked repeatedly during a tech timeout, definitely not about the tech aspect. He did a pixel boost at the ESL Pro League Season 3 finals on LAN against G2 on Inferno. You can go look it up when that was against the rules at the time. The problem here is there have been many conflicts of interest in esports. I pointed out the NBK Double Pony OG one, where earlier this year at Flashpoint 3, he played in a competition which was a qualifier for the World Championship and could potentially have played against the team he was currently signed for, OG, with a different team, and or created an easier way for them, and all sorts of potential fuckery. Obviously, in the past, I pointed out like Double Lift and Lean In, TSM in League of Legends. Wherever possible, you want to avoid these conflicts of interest because they just open the door for all sorts of fuckery be going on, especially behind the scenes. And you can see there's some sort of a connection in public. Does that infer something? But it's going to be really hard to police these things. And obviously, my question comes like this. I'm not the police. I'm not the guy in theory beyond like socially in terms of status who can really do much about this, right? What about CSPPA, the Players Association? Like, do players who aren't FalleN not have concerns about what this means, that he has this special relationship, a literal business partnership with Valve, even if it's through companies? ASIC, are they just fine with that? Is one player allowed to do that and then still compete in all the same contexts? And what if ASIC then takes evidence to Valve about that player or someone associated with that player, or maybe the other way around? Maybe some of that player is against, or but he's in a conflict where they're having to decide between two people. Now, here's the thing. I get why FalleN wants to do this deal, but I do think, actually, that the business side of the game did kill some of FalleN's actual career potential. He's someone who has been heavily involved in the business side, as far as I'm aware, basically since his team got really good in 2016. That was why, even when they'd won the major, and then that whole shenanigan happened where they go into SK, where they're going to stay in Luminosity, that was basically, as far as I found out, I read between the lines, but I had a lot of it confirmed later on by people involved in it. I basically found out that, like, it was just him doing that. He was the one pushing all that stuff because he thought personally with his relationship with the Luminosity guy, he could get more money, or maybe had a better in with that guy, or he just felt a personal like loyalty to that guy. And so he was like, it was his teammates that wanted to move, mate. I had some of them later come and just straight up tell me, like, I didn't actually like you before that, but when I saw you make that video, I was like, I don't know how he's got this info, because he's right, but none of us have leaked it. But he's actually nailed him. He's going, right, FalleN was wrong on this one. He's full of shit. So I get why he's done it, but I think, unfortunately, you've seen this throughout FalleN's career, that he has repeatedly looked to secure his business concerns, and it seems like he's done a fabulous job in that regard, but I think it's taken a hit on his playing career when you look over the years how he's fallen off and degraded, and he doesn't seem like his mind's in the game as much. And at this point in time, the main reason to be a pro player isn't just to make the salary that you do every month, but it's to keep your stock up and your figure, your influence at the highest possible, so that you can then do all these deals and business things on the side. And I'm sure it certainly tickles the itch of competing, to be in the game and to be in a Tier 1 team, etc. But that isn't the same as if the business stuff was separate, you didn't ever think about it, and you were just laser focused in, like, you know, the best players in the world are right now, like FalleN himself used to be once upon a time in Counter-Strike. So I don't really know what we do about this. I don't really know actually how anyone polices it. Basically, the Valve themselves would have to just sort of say, all right, we're not going to allow this, but wait, it's us who did it. I will say this, though, and this is one angle that I want people to think about. Oh, this is fucking rich when you consider the things that Valve has done in the past. Like last year when Valve came along, and finally, I'm glad they did this, they said that people had to declare whatever conflicts of interest they had. So, for example, if KGB and Carrigan had indeed still owned Astralis shares, they would have had to make as much public. If, for example, Lurpis, Tommy from IGC, working with MIBR, also owned shares in ENT, then he has to declare that, so we can see if there's any conflict there. And they even implied at the time that you'd have a set amount of time where you'd have to resolve all these conflicts. And they were doing it in a sort of like a very haughty manner of like, we won't allow these in our game, which I like, by the way. I think that's good. I like being elitist like that and being very strict with certain rules to make sure that you have to really go out of your way to cheat or fuck around or do unethical things. I like that approach generally if you're going to make a game. My problem is Valve themselves then turn around and then they make a deal that gives them a conflict of interest and with a player at that. So at this point in time, I get the vibe at the moment they aren't asking people to declare these. I heard for this last major there was no thing where you had to declare anything that you were supposed to do before the Rio major. So it sounds almost as though this has already affected how Valve's dealing with things, or they're just giving up caring about any conflicts of interest. So I do have my concerns about this, actually. Speaking of which, Thorin's thoughts. flowing out like a beautiful, delicious liquid, filling you with vital energy to think about things. Well, you could always get a Thorin Thoughts custom shaker and fill it up with some delicious gamer subs, couldn't it? From gamersubs.gg, code Thorin, Thorin for 10% off your order.
Hi, this is Ginsburg and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
This video was kindly supported by Iskander, Lager15, Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Travis Goff, Zack Schmidt, Ochs, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Chronic Alcoholism, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and of course, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want to ask me a question? Maybe you want to know who the guests are for my upcoming content, or you'd like to take part in one of those long donated discussions. Well, put your money where your mouth is at the Patreon link in the description box below and join the Skrilluminati today.